Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Michaela Peters. In case it's not obvious, I did just wake up. And please excuse all the laundry that's going on in the background because right now I'm trying to get through approximately 3 weeks of unfinished laundry because I spontaneously went to the US when I wasn't expecting to. So there's that. We have pretty nice weather today in Finland and have had all week because you can actually see some blue in the sky. Normally it's gray for a long time, but not today. But yeah, I'm trying to get myself to go run outside because I realized I like that better than going to the gym, which is why I never buy gym memberships. And then I remember, and then I tend to waste 30 euros on a membership I don't use for the semester. That's fine. I used it once. It's expensive. Maybe I'll use it next week or tomorrow. Let's see. But today, it's a little bit windy, it looks like, but it's going to be nice. And I'm going to make this really chill and use this to drink morning tea. Actually, I'm drinking tea today and wake up. So I could have done this before I go to meet some friends for lunch when I actually look more presentable, but I decided not to because I was like, that's going to be too stressful. If I do it now, I'll feel more chill. Okay, time for a break. I don't know where this cup is from. It's got an H on the bottom of it. I think that's Prisma or something. I don't know. Tell me if you know. Okay, so today I want to talk about religiosity comparisons between different cultures. And this may turn a lot of people off because I know this for a fact. Religion is something that a lot of people have a very visceral kind of negative feeling towards, and I can understand why in some instances. And I'm not really going to talk about what religion I'm talking about because I'm going to subscribe to the Finnish mentality here and be like, religion and spirituality are your business kind of thing. But I want to talk about observable differences that I've noticed in religious communities between different cultures, because my whole theory on this is that the culture that you're in, its dominant effect is going to trickle into any sort of organizational religion. And it doesn't really matter if the religion spans countries. I have observed that there are noticeable differences in how people behave sociologically within different countries, and that's what I want to talk about. And then I realized I actually have some experience with Hispanic culture too, and maybe I'll kind of throw that in there at the end. I just don't feel like it's as relevant to this discussion, and I also feel like I wouldn't even say it's outdated because I'm going off of data from a while ago, but I'd almost talk more about Hispanic people living in the US, which then you have to consider the dominant US culture surrounding that, and then that gets complicated. All right, that might be interesting. Maybe we'll get to that later. Okay, so my whole theory about Americans is Americans are very competitive, and Americans have a very hard time resisting the idea of comparing themselves to other people. Now, you may be like, oh, well, this is just human nature. Yes, it is. However, I feel like the flaw with Americans is they do this much more overtly, and they have a harder time concealing that this is what they're actively doing in their minds. Okay, so what do I mean by this? I'll give an example that's not related to a religious community, but related to being in academia. I noticed when I was in a university setting that people usually would be very bragging about the number of involved activities that they had. So for instance, if they were in this club and in this club and doing this and doing that and studying something really hard, they felt the need to advertise this. And this goes back to my video about why overachievers have low self-worth to, validate themselves in a way. And I don't really know what kind of reaction people are looking for. I noticed I started doing this too, and then I, at some point, decided it was annoying and that I need to stop. No offense to my dad, but a lot of times growing up, my dad would be like, I don't have time for this. And then I started being like that too. I would just literally be like, I don't have time for this anytime something was annoying me. And it's no, I'm going to quote the TED Talk video. I'd really have to dig for this one, but the quote is, "Time is highly elastic and it stretches to fit what we choose to put into it." So using "I don't have time for this" as an excuse is a very poor excuse, and instead you just need to own up to, I don't want to have this conversation, I don't like what I'm doing right now, I don't like this interaction. And yeah, that's really direct and really uncomfortable, but that's the truth. Instead, you're just lying to yourself and other people by saying you don't have time for something. You're choosing not to have time for something. So yes, Americans choose to have time, or pretend that they're choosing to have time, for things that they feel are going to gain them respect in society, which means that they're very busy, right? So talking about how busy you are, bragging about how busy you are, is a badge of honor. So let's now extend this to a religious community. So obviously, universally, religion is going to teach you that being a good, kind person to other people is, above all, very important. How do you do this? Obviously, just with how you treat other people. However, in the US, and actually, if you do some research on this, because I found this very interesting, there's the whole, the reason why everything I just explained happens has to do with the Protestant work ethic. So, the mini history lesson behind this is like, what did this happen? 1700s, that people wanted religious freedom and they couldn't get it in Europe. There's a bunch of stuff also with like Bible translation stuff and people not getting access to it. So a bunch of people were like, I'm going to get on the Mayflower and go establish my own religion in the US. Cool. So they were like religious self-starters. They were like the entrepreneurs of new religions. And there's actually this whole thing about like a lot of them being established out of the Burnover district, which is somewhere in Pennsylvania. Yeah, how do I know all this? Pretty sure that's from Netflix. Again, would have to dig for that one, but yeah, anyway, this is where I'm getting it from. Netflix, a very reputable source. It's sort of like Wikipedia, which I do believe Wikipedia is a reputable source, by the way, so yeah. Okay, time for a break. Okay, so yeah, these people came to the US and they're like, we're gonna start our own religion. So this whole idea behind Americans living to work rather than working to live really comes from the Protestant work ethic, supposedly, and the fact that you almost prove your morality by how productive you are. Like, this is a real thing, okay? Like, from a sociological standpoint. So now let's factor religion into that. You don't prove that you're a worthy community member by being a good person and being kind to others and spending your time maybe like helping people or like connecting with people or like being nice to other people. Like, I think about when I was in Kyrgyzstan, the amount of like grandmas who would invite me over for tea and I would just go spend time with them. Like, that to me is a much more virtuous act than needing to prove my religiosity, self-worth through looking very active within a religious community. But that is what in the US is going to define you as like a good religious person. And yeah, so essentially it becomes competitive within the religious community with like who is displaying how religious they are based on the amount of time that they're dedicating to structured religious activities. Yeah, and that's going to prove like how virtuous you are, so to speak. And this has always been hard for me. Like, I'm going to be very honest. I have like some sort of time blindness issues due to the fact that I have ADHD, probably. Not probably, that's definitely what's happening. So like this idea of having to like structure my time to fit more into it is sometimes overwhelming to me. And I don't really think of things in terms of time. I think I've talked a little bit about how 9 to 5 stresses me out because I have to think in terms of hours. I don't like to think in terms of hours, I like to think in terms of tasks, and however long the task is going to take is how long it's going to take. So blocking out like blocks of time to do a certain thing like really like stresses me out. Like, I have no other words for it. But yeah, so that would be my challenge around this personally. But some people are all about that, and they get really involved and they feel good about themselves, and that's fine. But what I find sometimes inadvertently is that people who are doing that kind of stuff, and again, where does overachieving come from? Low self-worth. I'll go back to this whole thing. People can sometimes, get on the high horse, so to speak, and look down on other people who are not behaving as they are or investing as much time as they are, especially when they're not obvious. I kind of joke, like, being a mom is the thing that, like, gets you out of everything because people kind of leave you alone because raising a kid is so hard. I mean, it is, don't get me wrong, but, I think being, like, young and single is, like, totally makes you a target for why aren't you, like, more involved, right? It makes sense, like, but at the same time, I grew up with that and it sucked. So I don't appreciate it when I was just trying to make $1, man. I don't know. It's also really hard for me because I feel like I was raised with these conflicting values of like religiosity on one hand, but then the example that was being displayed by most of my family members was more of like, I don't even want to say being obsessed with money, but being very preoccupied with money. Like a scarcity mentality, like there was never enough money. And I still struggle with this. So it was like on one hand, like work, the Protestant work ethic, right? Like here I am working 80 hours a week over the summer. And on one hand, like, you know, I was kind of like visually taught to do that. So that's actually, I'm going to take a side tangent to say there's like actually stuff in the Bible where it's like basically talking about how it's more important the example you're setting for your kids than what you're telling people to do. But I think that's like duh, that's obvious. So, you know, on one hand, I'm being told like, yeah, you know, be more like this. But then on the other hand, I'm going to go do this and not expect you to follow the example. So I think about this a lot. Like the example you set for your kids is like way more important than anything you ever tell them to do. Keep that in mind if you're a parent watching this. Okay, so that's one thing. And that doesn't mean the kid's always going to follow your example. I'm just saying I think it's a stronger reinforcing thing that happens. Reinforcing activity. There we go. Okay, so that's one thing I've like hated about, you know, yeah, like honestly, hate's a strong word, but like honestly, like hated about dealing with this kind of stuff in the U.S. is like this chronic feeling of feeling like I was never enough. It's still something I struggle with in a lot of aspects of my life, to be honest. Feeling like I was never enough, and like, you know, people were trying to like push me to do more, and it felt like I was already at a breaking point. And like I already feel like I've been living kind of like in survival mode most of my life. I'm back there. The only time I didn't experience that was in Finland, and that's when I had my psychological break, as I say. Yeah, I guess I could talk more openly about that. Maybe I have a little bit, but anyway, that's besides the point. So yeah, it's fine. So back to surviving and worrying about housing and, you know, basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's cool. It's whatever. Yeah, it's kind of sad because, like, you know, I got a bunch of friends I, like, don't have time to see because I'm just, like, money. Cool. All right, so that's the U.S. Let's actually talk about Hispanic people within the U.S. because I feel like that, like, fits a little better with this ordering here. So what I just described about Americans, I feel like is actually amplified by Hispanic people living in the U.S. Why? What I've heard, and I have no idea if any Hispanic people are watching this to validate this, but Hispanic people who come to the U.S. sort of develop this superiority complex. I am not observing this. This is what I've been told. Okay, and there's sort of like something about them looking down on the people who are still like stuck within their old country, or home country rather. And so they feel very like a sense of entitlement almost. And so I actually feel like the Hispanic people who come to the U.S. like can be more competitive sometimes and much more like, why aren't you doing more? You're supposed to be doing more. You're supposed to be really involved. And if you're not, it's like you're like worthless and they're going to try to like shame you into doing more. But like more extremely than with the U.S. mentality. That was my experience, and I was only ever like adjacently involved in a Hispanic religious community because it was like the way that I was trying to facilitate learning Spanish. So like my Spanish is still pretty decent, thanks to these experiences, to be very honest. Then I had one really traumatic experience where I was like 16, and then I got this like 30-year-old stalker, and then I had to like break the news to him that I was 16. He's like, I thought you were older. I was like, even if I was older, man, I'm not going for you. You don't even speak English, and like, no. Anyway, yeah, so I've had quite the life. All right, but anyway, yeah, I just found that they were always much more, like, judgmental. Like, I don't have a better word for that. Which, yes, this is a lot of people's issue with organized religion. Oh, people are so judgmental. Which, I always say the ironic part about that is, like, I can't even tell you how many things in the Bible talk about not being judgmental. So it's just, like, really, like, a true irony there. And it's like, no, you just need to stop doing that. If you want to make an internal judgment on, I don't want to be friends with this person because of X, Y, and Z, that's fine. Keep that to yourself. You don't need to go around telling other people about that. Like, I don't see the point. I think it's kind of rude. Yeah, venting is one thing if somebody pisses me off and I'm, like, need to like complain about them, but going around making judgments on other people's spirituality, I've just like had a hard time understanding this like my whole life because I think it's so immoral and incorrect on so many levels. Like literally. Okay, anyway, but I digress. But it is interesting to me, like, why this happens, and again, low self-worth, trying to compare yourself, trying to put yourself up more. So it's sad, and this is why I keep saying, like, the world would be a genuinely better place if more people could feel good about themselves. So how do you do this? Honestly, thank you to my channel, because this is helping me feel good about myself. Like, yeah, I occasionally get a wackadoodle who's like, you know, saying mean things to me or inappropriate things or whatever, but most of the time I met with like a lot of really positive support, and like people are really interested in my videos, and I feel like they're like helping people somehow, maybe through like a cultural lens dialogue, and like this makes me feel good about myself. So whatever you need to do to go feel good about yourself, like please go do that. I don't care what it is. Like, you know, put yourself around people who make you feel good about yourself. Get away from people who don't make you feel good about yourself, or limit contact with them. And if they're your family, I get it, but still limit some contact. It's like the quote about boundaries are, it's like a Brene Brown quote. Ugh, what is it? Boundaries are, it's something about like, they help me feel safe and like love you from like a proper distance that like, yeah, makes me feel safe essentially. So there's nothing wrong with setting healthy boundaries. But yeah, so, you know, stop judging people, man. I don't know. That's all I have to say about that. Like, you don't like interacting with somebody, that's fine. Just limit your contact. That's all I have to say about that. And if you work a lot like me, it kind of does it itself. So anyway, okay. But yeah, so that's super confusing to me. In terms of this judgmentalness, I've experienced this a little bit less in other countries. Finland, it's almost non-existent, which is probably part of why I really like Finland. I actually had this like epiphany one day where I was like, I'm like supposed to be in Finland, because being in America, it's really hard to not be materialistic, which the Bible also doesn't like, right? But also, like, yeah, being less materialistic and less obsessed with money, like actually focused on spirituality. Because that, if you look at the definition of spirituality, and this is the thing I find so hilarious about like making judgments on other people's spirituality, because the definition of spirituality is concerned with things outside of the, like the concrete present physical world. Like that is like, Google the definition of spirituality. Maybe I'll stick it here if I remember. I'm always really bad at that, but yeah, I'll try to remember. But spirituality is like, you know, concerned with like not the material physical world. And that was like, yeah, the epiphany that I had, so to speak. I was like running in the woods one day here, and I was like, oh, I think I'm supposed to like be here because I'm like less obsessed with like, you know, survival. But then at the same time, I had like a psychiatric break here, as I say. So now I'm not the first person to have one of those in La Plata. Apparently it's pretty common. So yeah, but I mean, I speak openly about that because I feel like more people need to like really understand. And it's the thing is, it's like fine for Finnish people, but it really like messes with international people. It's kind of crazy. Yeah. So anyway, yes, spirituality, it's like very strange. You can judge somebody, right, or externally look at what somebody's doing, but to me that does not prove their spirituality because it's such an inward process. So anyway, I'm getting a little bit ranty here, but all right. So in Kyrgyzstan, I did have a little bit of challenges around people giving me a hard time. There was one with being involved enough, right? There was like 1 month where I was like traveling, like a month and a half, solid month and a half. I went to Armenia for 2 weeks. That was a nice trip. That was when I went to Karabakh before Azerbaijan, you know, went in there during COVID. Great. I mean, yeah, that's really unfortunate. Maybe I shouldn't be advertising that I went to Karabakh because I have wanted to go to Azerbaijan. All right, I'm thinking about whether I need to like edit this out or not. I don't know. I'm gonna have to do more research on that. Okay, anyway, so Azerbaijan, yeah, cool. It's actually really funny. Don't talk to people from Azerbaijan about the fact that you went to Armenia. It will piss them off. And I'm like, obviously I'm not from either country, so I have no favoritism. I've just like spent time in Armenia. I haven't spent time in Azerbaijan. But yeah, actually, yeah, Armenia I had no problems. But I was there for such a short period of time. It's kind of different. All right, so Armenia, I was there, and then I was like, I went to go visit my family in Italy, and my grandparents were visiting. We went to Uzbekistan, and then I went to Belgium. It was like literally I was traveling for a month and a half because I had a month and a half off. It's like wild. You know, I should have known, because this was also at the point at which then I went to Thailand and then I went to Spain, and by the time I got to those trips, I was so tired and like didn't want to go on them. And I'm like, look at what you're doing again. And you're like, I'm tired of traveling. Like, I wonder why. Like, you didn't learn from your mistakes before. And yeah, sometimes it's how humans work, and humans work, and it takes them more and then ones to learn from their mistakes. Okay, so now I'm going to get into, so back to Kyrgyzstan. So I was given a hard time there because I was like MIA for a month and a half, and I remember I had somebody tell me, this like babushka in this congregation was like, your brain is so occupied and so busy that you don't have time to think about like spiritual things. And, I was pretty offended at the time, but I don't think she was wrong because of the psychiatric break I later had here. And then I realized, it's correct. Like, when you're in survival mode, man, which a lot of people are, so I don't think we need to criticize that. Okay, whatever. People do what they need to do. They're trying their best to lay off of them, man. Life is hard enough. I think it's really easy to, like, look at other people's lives and assume that, oh, their life is so much easier. Like, no. Like, even people who have seemingly perfect lives still have issues, and it doesn't mean that their issues are less than your issues, which, yes, somebody actually did comment on that. I think this person watches my videos in English, too. One of these Russian people about, like, you can't compare, like, the thing is you can't compare suffering. Like, yes, I could be like, oh man, like, I live in actual poverty. I'm going to quote something real quick. The Happy documentary talks about how the average rickshaw driver in India is happier than the average New Yorker. Let's think about that. So let's go back to wealth does not make you happy. And this is why I get frustrated, because people believe that wealth makes you happy. No, wealth gives you freedom and wealth gives you power. And humans have like weird preoccupations with wealth and with wealth, but with power and freedom. Fine. But recognizing that happiness is an inside job, as somebody told me, is much more important than being like, once I get here, I'll be happy. Like, no, happiness starts today. Change starts today. Like, you have control over those emotions. They have nothing. They may have some things to do with external circumstances. Like, I did just talk about how if you're around people who are like toxic, I hate using that word, but, don't make you feel good about yourself. That's one thing that like I do believe needs to change. And shame on me for not always having the balls to do that, even now. But, I'm working on it, man. Really working on it. But that's something that is important and changeable that will, like, help your life in a positive way. But, like, having more money, okay, it's cool, it's convenient, but, like, it's not going to make you happy. And, like, people need to realize that. And I think I've already known that my whole life. And maybe in some ways I should be disappointed in myself that I want more money, but like it's really just because I want stable housing. Like even my situation here, I literally have to clear all the crap out behind me because I'm about to rent this out for a couple months while I'm not here. So yeah, that's not very stable now, is it? I mean, it's one place, but the fact that I can't like even set things down. I've been living in a dumpster fire behind me for like months. All right, anyway, that's irrelevant, but I'm digressing again. This is gonna be like my longest, rantiest video. Okay, so in Kyrgyzstan, I met some of that from like one or two people, so I'm going to discredit that one. I'm going to throw that one out a bit. It wasn't like consistent. In the US, it was like really traumatic growing up. Like sometimes I wonder why I even still try, because I went through a lot and it was bad, but I think I just feel very strongly about, it's not that I don't care what other people think about me. I really do believe everybody cares what people think about them to like a healthy-ish extent, more or less, unless they're like literally like having an antisocial personality disorder or like are a psychopath, which is not most people, right? But yeah. Anyway, what's my point with this right here? Okay, well, it's time for a break. Okay, yeah, I don't know. I like my train of thought went somewhere because I started thinking about if I'm running out of time to go running because this video is getting ranty. Okay, so yeah, just try your best. That's all that matters, okay? We get brownie points for effort. Just remember that. Okay, and then sometimes I'm like, if you're really subscribed to like this whole even God thing, right? It's like, thank God he's the judge and not other people, because other people are mean. Other people are very mean. Like, stop being mean, okay? Like, what are you accomplishing by being mean to other people? And if you know you're mean to other people, you should listen to this. Because nobody's gonna like you if you're mean to them. I try really hard not to be mean to other people. I just might avoid them if they start stressing me out. It's kind of different. Okay, that's good. Yeah, I get told a lot of nice things about myself, and being called mean's never really been one that somebody has said to me, I don't think. Maybe once, but the ironic part is everybody hates that guy, so cool. All right, so, okay. So now I'm going to get into, like, Russian people in Finland, which might be a different subset of people, because when you come to Finland as a Russian person, especially like a political asylum seeker type of thing, religious asylum seeker, whatever, those are not the same, but you're seeking religious freedom kind of thing, or like, yeah, like war, persecution, whatever, these kinds of things. Okay, so when you come to Finland in that capacity, your life looks like this. You sit in Finnish lessons. By the way, I'm very jealous of these people because I would love to have this life. They literally sit in Finnish classes from like 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. 5 days a week for like 3 years until they learn Finnish. I would be speaking Finnish so well if I had that opportunity. I'm so jealous. Okay, so they do that. And the rest of their time they basically devote to like the religious community because of the fact that that's where they find, other Russian people and like a sense of like security, safety, belonging, feeling of home outside of their home country, even though they're from like all different places within their home country or countries. So, and they have a lot of hardship in Finland because there's a lot of like prejudice and racism towards Russian people, which ties into the history. But I've just found that like really like those Russian people are like, to me, truly like what the definition of spirituality is. Like the kinds of discussions that they have are so like higher level and like analytical, and like they analyze like stuff from the Bible, whereas like I would say that people who like the Americans are much more focused on, and this is a thing, this is actually like a sociology thing, like doing versus being cultures. You also have to keep in mind Americans are individualistic and Russians are considered collectivist, but Americans are much more talking about like what they do and what they did and how like their actions prove their spirituality, whereas Russian people are much more concerned with their knowledge and how their knowledge of the Bible proves their, I wouldn't even say proves their spirituality, because I don't believe that they're trying to prove anything. I think they're actually just like they enjoy it for the sake of enjoying the spirituality, and like I don't know, like because I feel like a sense of peace around these kinds of people like I've never felt around anybody before. Like it's like kind of amazing. Like you're like, this is like a real spiritual person. It's like somebody who you feel like safe with or like comfortable around, and you feel like they're not judging you. Like, wow. Like, I can't even explain it. It's, like, one of the most amazing experiences I ever had. Like, I literally, like, cried when I had to leave this experience. Like, I'm not even kidding. I cried for, like, a day. I cried the entire week that I left Finland. Like, before I went back to the US, because I was kind of afraid of plugging into the matrix and, working a lot. I don't even work that much compared to some people, to be honest. I did over the summer, but not, like, all the time. Not during off-season at the restaurant. But yeah, it was just like, I mean, really, like, wow. I don't even have like enough positive words to express how great that experience was. And I'm kind of out in the woods here, and like, depends who you ask. Finnish people may or may not say that. Depends if they're from Helsinki or not. Anybody from anywhere else would say that. And I think, because it's kind of like I always had this craving from a young age to go to Wyoming and be alone and be in the middle of nowhere and like feel super like zen. And I feel like maybe that's what they're experiencing. And so they have time to like reflect and, I don't know, they're just like calm. Like I just feel so emotionally regulated being around these people. Like I can't even explain. It's like such good energy. But to me it's like that is like spirituality. It's like the kind of person you are, like the aura you give off, like just being nice to other people. Like let's get away from the I'm so good because I do this and I do that and you don't do that, so you should feel bad and why aren't you doing that? And that's America. I hate to say it, but like there's a reason I've been running, man. I had a couple friends say to me, they're like, you've been traveling so much, you look like you're running from the law. And I was like, maybe. Yeah, I'm running from a life I don't like. It's so sad. Whatever. Life could be harder, You can always tell yourself that. But at the same time, you should validate your own problems. They're legitimate, okay? I know that they're not the same as other people's, but your problems are legitimate. And it's okay to feel how you feel. It's okay to feel sad sometimes. I forget what that's from, but it's true. Okay, so yeah, like I have nothing but like the highest degree of utmost respect for like the religious community experience with Russian people I've experienced in the middle of nowhere Finland. Like wow, and the way that these people help each other and are kind to each other and support each other, and like I can't, like words cannot explain the feeling I have for this. I'm like, oh my god, it makes me want to cry right now. And I'm just like, I should just abandon my whole life so I can have this experience over and over again. But alas, we have the survival problems. And then I feel like some sort of sense of obligation to my family. That's why I say, like, if I was going to be in the US, like, it has to be near my family. Otherwise, I'm not doing it because I, like, don't like America. Because I feel emotionally and morally depraved there and spiritually depraved. Because everything's about money and how things look and how things present and how things appear. And it's really like fake and superficial. And I think this is the thing that people start to get frustrated with Americans. It's like, yeah, they like talk really easily, but like getting to a deeper level with them is really hard. And I talked about this a little bit more between like Finnish people and American people. All right, so now let's talk about Finnish people. If you're still watching this, great. If not, if you got bored, sorry. Maybe I need to like throw in those. This is where the Finnish part starts, so skip here if you're bored. So I don't have like a lot of experience with like Finnish people because I don't understand Finnish, and so it kind of is hard for me to go to like a Finnish religious thing and not get like bored and like I'm falling asleep. But Finnish people have like a very strong sense of humility, which is very important from like a biblical perspective. The Bible talks about considering other people as superior to yourself. And I really think that's exemplified in Finnish culture in general, but you especially see that, right? Again, this trickle-down effect, you especially see that in the congregation. I do feel like people are just like very kind to each other, very not judgmental, very not telling other people what to do. This is one thing, right? Like Russian people like to make a lot of comments on like, you've lost weight, you haven't lost weight, that kind of thing. Like, you got fatter. I don't know. Like just that kind of like really blatantly like direct stuff, like, whoa. And sometimes Russian people will tell you what they think if they have an opinion on ways that they think they can help you, right? Which I think Americans are trying to do, but sometimes maybe the delivery is pretty harsh. And again, this is all my experience, and like keep in mind I'm foreign in Finland, so like I think the standards or the expectations that people have for me in Finland as a foreign person, because they like don't understand my cultural background well enough, like they don't even know what to do with me. I'm like this weird wild card. Okay, you know how many like random Americans just like show up in the middle of a forest? No, not very many. Probably never, but like never in the history of this congregation has that happened except for me. Pretty sure that's true. Wow. Interesting. Okay. No wonder people want to hang out with me sometimes, because this is like really unusual. Okay. That's cool. Yeah, it makes me feel special and like people like me, and that's good for my self-worth. So again, whatever you need to do to feel good about yourself, go do it. I don't care what it is, as long as it's not illegal and terrible for somebody else. Okay, so Finnish people, the thing that I really like, also, like, Finnish people are a little bit more, like, liberal with certain stuff. Like, they're, like, pretty open to talking about, like, drinking alcohol. Which, like, yeah, I mean, I feel like alcohol sometimes can be, like, a taboo that people don't talk about. Or they hide it or something, but no, Finnish people just talk about it, and that's, like, normal for them. And I respect it. And then, let's see, what else? Well, my first experience also with, like, Finnish people in a religious community setting was, like, and this could just be Finnish people, like, I'm not saying this has to be, like, specifically within a religious setting, but, like, they're much more, like, honest about their feelings, much more transparent, and, like, maybe they feel, like, a sense of comfort because there's, like, you have the community thing in common, so maybe they're, like, more open with me than they would be with random people, although, I don't know, I feel like Finnish people are pretty open with me in general, so this is, like, a really hard comparison to make, but, like, really open to talking about their feelings, like, what's been hard for them, like very curious, like wanting to know what you think about Finnish culture, and they feel like kind of like supportive, and maybe much more like if you want to learn Finnish, that would be cool, and like we'll support you doing that, versus maybe in general Finnish society that's like less of a thing. So yeah, but like they're just like they're very no, I feel like they're very kind. Like maybe they're a little bit less like constantly inviting you to their house like Russian people would, but they still do it, like, which is kind of surprising, right? Because like maybe Finnish people don't do that as much. Although I feel like in Europe people do go to each other's houses much more than what I've seen in the US, so I'm not really sure. But no, I just think Finnish people are like very sweet. Like I don't know how else to put it, but you know, like they might be like a little bit awkward sometimes. They like don't know what to do with you. You're foreign, but they still like try to be nice to you, and like sometimes they just don't know how to approach you. Whereas Russian people are much more like going to come up to you and be like, oh, like who is this? Like oh, like I don't know. So there's definitely like some behavioral differences, and it's kind of interesting sometimes like hearing the Russian people talk about like Finnish people and how Finnish people act, and like this is so Finnish, or when they're like trying to use Finnish Finnish because, you know, they're learning it. Like, it's cute. I don't know. So, like, culturally, it's just, like, I just feel like this is such a good fit for me, like, being in Finland. I'm like, man, maybe I should just get a job here. It's, like, literally how I feel after recording this. But I just feel much more, like, psychologically and socially and emotionally safer in these kinds of spaces. Now just out in the general real world, it gets rough here because, you know, getting hired as a foreign person is really hard, and then, like, academia is your only path, and then, like, you know, sometimes being around, like, only, like, school-aged people or university-aged people, rather, can be very limiting in terms of, like, life perspective. So I get that because it's not like families. Like, I actually felt like in this Russian congregation, people were so, like, I had just, like, never seen such emotionally stable families. Like I literally just, like, fed off of their, like, and I think with Finnish people, I've seen this too. Like, they were just so, like, united as a family and so, like, just, like, stable and happy to be around each other. Like, one really stupid example about this is, well, stupid's not the right word, but just, like, small example of this, rather, is, so there was, like, a little girl who's, like, I don't know, 6 years old. And then she's like, Mommy, my throat hurts. And then her mom was like, said something back. It's like, oh, I understand. But she literally said this word in Russian, which is like, kind of like, I feel you, man. Like, I don't know how to, yeah, сочувствую. It's like, yeah, like, I empathize with you, like, that kind of thing. And I was like, wow, that was like a good response. It's like really simple, but it's like, you know, whereas sometimes in America, I feel like it'd be like, get over it. And it's like, well, I mean, it does suck that your throat hurts. So, I don't know. No, but, like, I feel like I have, like, an equal appreciation, really, for, like, Russian and Finnish culture, just in different ways. But, like, I just have more experience with Russian because I'm united by this, you know, linguistic factor. But no, like, again, if money and time were no object, dude, I'd be in these language classes learning Finnish. Like, I couldn't even tell you. Like, that would bring me so much intrinsic joy. Like, yeah, why do I study Russian? Because it's, like, the amount of, like, maybe spiritual joy, right? Like, internal, like, joy that it brings me is so great that it's, like, something that is always going to be important to me no matter what happens in my life. Like, I already know that. It's, like, part of my identity, you know? So, yeah, very ranty, very long. This is, like, my longest video. I thought about this video a lot. I actually thought about it for, like, an hour on the airplane when I was, like, flying to or from the US, I forget. And I was like, this could be interesting. And again, it's kind of like a trigger warning thing because I know, like, especially in Finland, like, a lot of people are very averse to religion, which, you know, is fine. Like, I'm not offended, but I just thought from a cultural perspective, it would be very interesting to kind of share my experience. And again, I'm the experience of one person. It's a very limited experience, so it may not be what other people experience. Maybe if a Finnish person came from Finland and went to the US, they'd have totally different experience because the Americans would probably treat a foreign person differently than they treat me. And maybe part of it's my fault because I, like, as my brother tells me, I internalize very, you know, like, specific expectations that other people set for me, and I have a hard time feeling, like, not, like, bad if I can't meet them. So, again, just get around people who make you feel good about yourself because your life will be a lot better for it. Yeah. All right, so that's everything. I really need to go running if this is going to happen. Ugh. Okay, and then I got to do this Russian one at some point. Okay, so until my next video, thank you. Bye.